Did you sign up for the SuperHalfs and then realize just how expensive it is to run the Copenhagen Half Marathon? We've all been there, but this video is just for you because I'm going to be breaking down how to do Copenhagen on a budget and what to expect from the race. I ran the Copenhagen Half Marathon in 2023, and while it wasn't my favorite half marathon of the 12 I ran during 2023, it was overall a good experience and I really enjoyed visiting Copenhagen. First, let's talk about the race day experience. The very first thing you should do in Copenhagen after you arrive is pick up your bib. I always recommend when you're traveling internationally for a race to get the bib as early as possible. Especially for a race like Copenhagen that has 30,000 runners, you're going to want to get that out of the way before the lines show up on the Saturday before, when everyone else who's traveling in also arrives for their bib pickup. At the expo, you're going to be given a goodie bag that is full of free swag. Make sure you keep this goodie bag because that plastic bag is the only thing you're allowed to store at the bag drops before the race. Once you have your goodie bag, you can head inside and you can pick up your bib number as well. There's also a few vendors selling stuff, but for 30,000 people, it wasn't a huge expo. The Copenhagen Half Marathon is also a mid-morning race, which is my least favorite type of race when we are traveling internationally for the run. I prefer my races to be first thing in the morning so I can get them out of the way and go back to sightseeing. But Copenhagen, they say we are taking your mid-morning and we're going to take a good chunk of your afternoon as well. When I ran it in 2023, the race started at 11:15 with the elite runners. However, despite them saying you should be in the corrals at 11:15, I did not start until after 12 o'clock. I spent 45 minutes in those corrals. So while I recommend you eat breakfast 2 to 3 hours before your race, you should also bring a snack for the corrals because it is a hot mess and you're gonna be hungry again. Now, theoretically, in 2024, this will not be a problem. They claim that they're moving back to an old location and everything's gonna work itself out, but I have some doubts about that because how do you forget how to start a race? You change locations and suddenly you don't know how to run a race? I don't believe them. I'm personally of the conspiracy theory that somebody very important to the race left the race between 2022 and 2023, and they're still trying to figure out all of the jobs that person kept going smoothly, because I genuinely believe that is more plausible than we changed locations on our race and we forgot how to run a race. No. So let's see in 2024 if they remember how to run a race. Once you're on the course though, it is absolutely electric. All of Copenhagen comes out to celebrate, and there are just people everywhere. There's also a lot of running clubs who are bringing confetti and streamers and smoke things just to really amp up the atmosphere with music and cheering. Overall, the course is very flat and it takes you through a lot of the smaller neighborhoods that go around Copenhagen. You don't spend a ton of time in the, downtown famous section. However, the really famous section of Copenhagen is quite small, so you really couldn't run a half marathon there even if you tried. But you do get to see a lot of different sides of Copenhagen in one very convenient course. Here's another thing that was there in 2023 and was bad, but it might be better in 2024. I'm just not sold on it yet. And that is the finish line. You see, in 2023, the finish line went here and there was a road like that. And instead of having, ambulances come in this way and people head out this way, they had ambulances come in this way and people head out this way. So there was a lot of traffic of emergency vehicles trying to get through, thousands of runners who were trying to get out. It was so crowded. And then on top of that, they had all of the people with the waters and the medals were in very small little clumps. So instead of spreading them out across the entire road, because they had to allow the ambulances through, everybody was just kind of clumped right here. And what that meant was there were 30,000 runners all trying to get into a very small clump. And that was a huge problem. It probably took me another 45 minutes after I finished the race just to get my water and a medal. Let's not even talk about picking up the bags and everything else you would do after a race. Like, this race took my entire day. And while I was there, waiting for my water and medal, I had the misfortune of listening to the Copenhagen announcer at the finish line. And that announcer was obsessed with the elite runners. Listen, I love elite runners. They're awesome. It's so cool. I could never do what they do. But when you're starting to approach the people who are finishing at 2 hours 30 to 3 hours, you don't have to talk about the elite runners. The elite runners are probably already at brunch or whatever meal elite runners eat. I don't know. They're busy, they're gone. And this announcer, instead of saying, "Oh, congrats, you finished," he was saying, "Oh, congrats, it took you 3 times as long as the elite runners to finish." That's not motivational. Shut it up. No. Anyways, if you've already signed up for the Copenhagen Half Marathon and you're trying to complete your SuperHalfs, best of luck. But if you've listened to this section and you're thinking, whoa, maybe not for me, that's fair, that's fair. And let me tell you, Brussels Half Marathon, 2 weeks later, great option as well. If you're watching this video for the 2024 Copenhagen Half Marathon, I'm really hoping you've already booked your flights and accommodations. But if you aren't, let's talk. First thing, book those things now. As I said, Copenhagen has over 30,000 runners. On top of regular tourists, that is a lot of people heading into Copenhagen for just one weekend. If you're looking to find cheap flights, I always recommend starting with Ryanair, Wizz Air, EasyJet. Those are going to be the cheaper options just across Europe. If you can travel by train into the race, that's obviously going to be even cheaper than a flight, but Copenhagen and Denmark are a little bit north, so it's not the most central location for a lot of parts of Europe. And of course, if you're traveling from outside of Europe, even trickier. Scout your flight prices, but make sure you scout your flight prices with incognito mode on. You do not want cookies to be tracking your prices in your searches, or else they will start increasing the prices. This is a genuine thing that airlines do, so just make sure you're using incognito mode for any flight searches. And also, don't get too overexcited by the third-party sellers who are selling flights. You're running a half marathon and you are spending so much time training. You don't want to risk your race on saving the extra 10 bucks and getting your entire flight canceled by a third party with nothing you can do about it. You want to make sure you're booking directly through the platforms, even though it is going to be a little bit more expensive, but it will guarantee that you have safety and you have insurance for race day so you can get there for your race. Let's talk hotels. The cheapest way to stay in any city is going to be couchsurfing. I haven't used the official couchsurfing app, but I do use a Facebook group called Host a Sister that is just for women and female travelers who want to travel around the world. I've used it in a few cities, not Copenhagen yet, and it has been a really great experience for me, and I've loved being able to use it. However, if you don't want to go and sleep on a stranger's couch, there are more options. First, let's talk hostels. I wouldn't recommend a genuine hostel for a half marathon because genuine hostels can get a little noisy, but I do really like staying in pod hostels when I'm traveling. When I went to Copenhagen, I stayed at City Hub. It was just a great experience. They also have a sauna that's available for free. Pod hostel is a private room, but a shared bathroom. And the room is very, very small. It's essentially a bunk bed, but the two sides of the bunk beds are separate rooms. So you have the bottom bunk, but you have just a wall above your head. You're not actually talking to anyone. And then the top bunk has a wall below their bed. So again, you have complete privacy. There's usually a couple of hooks and a small amount of floor space for you. There's a lot of great free things to do around Copenhagen. It is a very expensive city, but that doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money seeing all the sights. One of the coolest things I learned about in Copenhagen that I unfortunately wasn't able to book is a green kayak. A green kayak allows you to rent a kayak absolutely for free, and in exchange, you go around the harbor and you pick up any pieces of trash, not with your bare hands, they have like grabbies things, and you pick up any trash you see and return it. So it's this really great environmental initiative that allows you to see the city in kayak without actually spending any money and giving back to the environment. 10 out of 10. Unfortunately, they do book up pretty quickly, so make sure you get ahead of that one if you're interested. I learned about it too late last year and I wasn't able to sign up. Another free thing that you can do, but be smart about it, is visit Freetown Christiania. It's a commune that was built in the 1970s on an abandoned military base. It's a really interesting place to visit because they operate completely on their own rules. Architecture there is also really interesting because they built everything themselves, so they aren't following the same guidelines that you might see in a normal city section. These are very unique guidelines. However, there are several rules when you're visiting Freetown Christiania. First, there's no photography, there's no videography. Those are all safety things. Don't talk on the phone and no running. Don't go for a run here, okay? Freetown Christiana, because of their free anti-government stance, has in the past been a home of different biker gangs. There has been some violence there over the years, so make sure you A, check up on safety information before you visit, and B, just stay aware of your surroundings. Freetown Christiana is also home to one of the other free things you can do in Copenhagen and across Denmark, which is visit one of the Forgotten Giants. The Forgotten Giants are these giant wooden statues that are scattered across Denmark in different woods, and they're just this beautiful art installation of kind of these peaceful giant beings. Do you like libraries? Copenhagen has a great option for you, and that is the Black Diamond. Black Diamond is the National Library of Denmark and features two distinct sections. The part that gives it the name the Black Diamond is a newer section that has amazing views of the city, and the old section, and the old library, was built in 1648, and it's just a gorgeous historical library that is all free to visit. Of course, be respectful, it is a library. Another free thing to do, and this one might be obvious, is just walk around the city. Copenhagen has so many amazing parks that I cannot pronounce their names of, so I am going to put them on the screen. But they're absolutely gorgeous with amazing views of the city and windmills and little ponds and trees. And it's just lovely and free for you to walk around and see. While you're on that walk, you can take a stop over to Nyhavn, which is the most famous kind of viewpoint city location of Copenhagen. And that is the famous harbor where you have all the beautiful multicolored buildings and the water and the boats. While you're on your walks, you can also check out the Little Mermaid statue. To be completely honest, this one's probably only going to take you about 5 minutes. You're going to look at it, you're going to take a few photos, and you're going to go, okay, I saw the Little Mermaid statue. And then you'll keep walking. But that's the point of a walk, is you get to see cool places, and you don't have to worry about spending tons of time there. Copenhagen also has a couple of really great free churches. I went into 2 of them that were both free, and they had very different vibes, but were kind of nice, just especially if I wanted to sit for a bit, rest my legs, which is my favorite travel hack, is sitting in churches, because they're free and they're usually cooler if it's a hot day, and I can catch my breath before I keep walking. The first of those churches that I went to is Frederick's Church, also known as the Marble Church. So this church officially opened in 1894, but the very first parts of its foundation was laid in 1749. And it was originally supposed to be built with this grand Rococo design. However, due to budgets, it did not happen. So instead what we ended up with 150 years later was the Marble Church. And it is still a really cool place to go in. It has a unique round shape to it that you don't see in a lot of churches. And like I said, it's cool, it's lovely. Very cool, literally. The second church I went in is a neoclassical cathedral called Church of Our Lady. What makes this church really cool is that if you visit after dark, there's just this kind of spooky atmosphere as they light the entire place in candles. They don't have any major overhead lighting. And you can't typically go into churches at night, but I think when you do get a chance to go into a church at night, you should take it because it's a completely different vibe. However, I'm not the biggest fan of the architecture, so I probably wouldn't have bothered going during the daytime. You can also check out a free walking tour while you're in Copenhagen. This is a great option if you want to get a new perspective on the city and learn a lot without paying a lot. That being said, it's not truly free. You should always tip your tour guide at the end of a free walking tour. I suppose a more technical name would be pay-as-you-want walking tours, but free walking tour is better marketing. What about food? Now, if we're really talking about a budget, obviously the answer is you want to eat most of your meals at a grocery store. And that is what I did for most of mine. However, I did also want to explore some of the local cuisine. I tried some other things, such as Holberg is located in Nyhavn as well, and that is a really cool Danish hot dog shop. So Danish hot dogs are a little more savory than the traditional hot dogs you might see in the United States. Remoulade sauce along with fried onions and pickles, and they also tend to be a different shape, being very long and bright red. There's a few different types you can get, including one that come in more of like a baguette roll that's been hollowed out with a hot dog in it. It wasn't too expensive, and it was just a nice little snack to have while sitting on that harbor. If you want something a little sweeter to help with your carb loading, I would really recommend checking out the bakery St. Peter's Baguerie. This is a bit of a well-known spot, but it's a little bit outside the city center, and it has great options for just all kinds of pastries. I definitely went there and just carbo loaded up. If you're coming from the US, one other thing to note is that you might not think the meals themselves are that expensive. I actually found once I translated the Danish kroner over to the US dollar that the meal part was basically the same as any major US city. But it's the booze that can get very expensive, which is a good thing you're here for a race, so you probably don't want to drink as much. But if you do want to drink, be prepared to spend money. That is not going to be a budget-friendly activity. Let's talk Copenhagen Card. If you're only visiting Copenhagen for 1 or 2 days, the Copenhagen Card probably isn't worth it. The price for just 24 hours of a Copenhagen Card is $72. Now, I don't think that's worth it for just 1 day, but the longer you spend in Copenhagen, the more worth it the card becomes. First, you're going to get free public transportation for anywhere you go in the city. That is a great benefit because each single metro ride costs $3.50. Next, you're going to be able to get into a lot of the major museums across the city for free. But the card is very expensive, so if you're only visiting for 1 or 2 days, I would just select 1 or 2 museums to do and just pay the entrance fee. But if you're there for 3+ days, absolutely grab a Copenhagen Card and just fill your days with museums. I did not get the Copenhagen Card because I was just there for the weekend, and I found it was perfectly fine for me and my goals. You know, I spent most of my time walking around, I did Freetown Christiana, I did all these other things that I told you about, and I love the city. Well, I would say it's absolutely possible to do Copenhagen on a budget. The one thing I will say is just don't get comfortable with the Danish kroner. Danish kroner is around 10x the US dollar, so you're going to be dealing with a vastly different currency. And I find that is my biggest issue when I'm traveling, is I tell myself, oh, I think this is the range I need to be in to be saving money, and then when I convert it, I'm like, oh no, I spent way more than I meant to. You know, the euro, the pound, the dollar, they're all pretty similar in ranges, but the Danish kroner is way above those, so be aware and pay attention. You're gonna have a great time running the Copenhagen Half Marathon, or you're not, and you're gonna have some great stories to tell. But it is possible to do Copenhagen on a budget, and I highly recommend doing the half marathon, if only to see this beautiful city. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. All I talk about is travel and running.